Hi there, and welcome to Candid Conversation Zoomed In and Comments video channel. My name is Cliff, and today I am in the Zoom with Andy Semotiuk. I hope I've got that pronounced
Yep.
right.
Semotiuk. Yep. Yeah.
Semotiuk. Awesome. I'm glad to get that right because nothing worse than screwing up a name,
No, that's all right.
especially especially some of the more difficult ones. So I want to make sure I got it right. You're a lawyer, and
Right.
I was specifically interested in immigration law and the like. And
Right.
when I looked at your profile, I said, "Ooh, I got to talk to him because there's a lot of stuff going on with immigration, particularly from the United States, with respect to what Donald Trump is doing down there."
Yeah.
Um, I said, "Hey, I got to talk to Andy about this," and I'm glad you've taken the time out to jump in here. Uh,
Sure.
one of my one of my first questions is um, what has really wowed you with regard to what the president of the U.S. has done with respect to immigration?
Well, I guess the answer would be that he's certainly not following what the rules of the game are. Uh, and it seems like a lot of his decisions are untethered from the Constitution of the United States. So we're in unmarked territory or unknown territory with him, and where we're going is not clear. I guess that's the way I would put it.
Yeah, and I bet that's really coming to the fore. I'm hearing that a lot of immigration lawyers are getting calls from people in the United States, particularly those who are in vulnerable positions. Is that the case in your practice? Are you finding that there's people calling up saying, "I want to come to Canada"?
Yeah, yeah, I'm getting calls like that, and I'm not surprised because President Trump is deporting a lot of people. Let me just give you one example of what I consider a concern. Uh, Recently, there was a deportation of, I think it was about 300 immigrants that was ordered by President Trump back to El Salvador. And the American Civil Liberties Union, or, people, civil liberties organizations, applied to the courts to block the deportation, saying, I guess, or arguing that, first of all, not everybody that's on the plane is deportable. And secondly, I think that there's a lack of jurisdiction or a lack of grounds for ordering the deportation. And they successfully convinced the court that indeed this deportation was not legally conducted properly. And so the judge ordered that the airplane containing the people who were flying back to El Salvador be turned around and brought back to the United States. But the administration did not abide by the judge's ruling, and the people were in fact deported to El Salvador. And as it turns out, among the people who were deported are people who are properly or were properly in the United States. One person in particular that's been reported was, I guess, a soccer player who was properly in the United States. So you have this situation where, first of all, people who shouldn't be deported were deported, and secondly, the administration was not abiding by the ruling of the court, the judge's ruling that the airplane be returned. And so right now, today, I'm not sure if they've already had the hearing or not, but the judge has ordered the administration to come to before the court and explain what's going on here because of the failure to abide by the court order. And what we have in the evolution with those circumstances is a clash between what's called the executive branch of government And sorry about that. My phone just rang.
Yeah, no worries.
Between the executive branch of government and the judiciary. And it's been long established, a case called Mayberry, long ago, I think in the 1800s, established that judiciary prevails over the executive branch if there's a clash between the two in terms of some principle. So there's a constitutional crisis in the unfolding there because the executive, namely Trump, should be abiding by the court order, and they're not.
Which is very, very striking because he admitted actually on Fox News saying, well, no, uh you can't defy the court. And yet here he is doing
Yeah,
just that. And
yeah,
what's really sad in this situation is you see these people that were deported into El Salvador, for example. There's video of them being bent over, heads shaven, very, very humiliating. There's been people
yes,
who are reported being chained up on the planes and treated very poorly by ICE.
yes,
It's really a bad scene. And yet, we have to acknowledge that people voted for this man, put him in the
yeah.
office that he's now in, and he said he was going to do this. He said, I am going to do this. So,
Well, I'm not sure he said that. He said he's going to deport illegal immigrants, but he
mhm.
didn't say, I'm going to deport legal immigrants. I'm not sure people would vote for deporting legal immigrants. And, there are a number of things he's doing that I doubt anybody supported. Like he wants to, this is not in my field, but he wants to take over Panama. He wants to take over Greenland. He wants to, you know,
Annex Canada.
annex Canada.
Yeah.
I don't think these were things that people were voting for when he was elected. So, so I think he's exceeding his mandate, is what the problem is.
Yeah, and that throws into some very interesting situations here with respect to what people should do. It's almost like a message that he's saying, we don't want you to come to the United States, period. Would you agree with that? Would you say that that's what they're really trying to say, or this administration is just trying to say, is that we don't want you here?
Yeah, there's a isolationist current in his activities and in the way he's approaching things. He seems to think that America would be better off by itself in the world, that it doesn't need any allies or friends, or if it needs friends or allies, the allies that he needs or they need, America needs, are allies like Putin from Russia or Xi from China or other such parties like the guy for Korea from Korea, North Korea,
Kim
that these
Jong-un.
are the
Yes.
kinds of people that he can get along with, and that these are the kind of people that, if any, America should align with, which is, well, it's shocking, is what it is. It's, I don't even believe his own followers think that these are the allies America needs to line up with. Um, he has a great loyal following, the MAGA followers.
Mhm.
I'm not disputing that he has a following, but I don't believe any of those. If you ask those people, I would be surprised if those people said, yes, what we need to do is ally ourselves with dictators like Putin in Russia and Xi in China and, these other guys from North Korea, etc. I just don't think that they would say that.
Yeah, which really is true. But getting back to the idea, though, of dealing with this from an immigration point of view, um, what should we, as I'm sure, as a nation, but also what should lawyers in your particular field be doing to basically one, mitigate this, and two, kind of challenge this to make sure that we don't end up with something in the form of a situation like in many countries overseas where we're just inundated with people claiming refugee status and the like. Our borders being flush with an influx. How do we want to respond? What would you say you would want lawyers to do?
Uh, that's a good question. I'll grant you that, Cliff. Look, there is no magic solution. There's no fantastic solution clearly evident that we should just follow. Certainly, the solution that President Trump has advocated, not departing, but deporting 11 million illegal immigrants, sounds very clear and exact. But even that solution is not really that very clear in this sense. Not everybody who is in this figure of 11 million people who Trump describes as criminals is a criminal. Indeed, the vast majority of those people are not criminals. They have not committed any criminal offenses, etc. There are some estimates about the number of people who are criminals and who deserve to be deported. And I don't think anybody's going to say, oh, no, let's not deport criminals, especially, serious people who have been convicted or who have committed serious felonies, offenses, violence, etc. Everybody's in favor of deporting those people. And I think the numbers are perhaps 1.5 million of that 11 million are such people. But the rest of them are, by and large, normal people that just have been living in the United States. They came to live and make a better life for themselves. They've been, something like 2/3 of them have been in the United States for over 10 years. 10 years, that's a long time. And you build up some equity over 10 years. It's not like they've just been sitting around doing nothing. They worked in jobs, they paid taxes, they, helped in the community and so on. But to get to your question, which is what should lawyers be doing? Well, this is a time for precision. This is not a time for exaggeration. And it's a time to abide by fundamental principles. And the most fundamental is the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the United States does not give Trump or Musk or anybody else the kind of powers that they are exerting. The powers that they purport to exert are primarily congressional powers. Congress is the one that's supposed to be deciding immigration law. So, and the only way to challenge what's going on is to do exactly what the ACLU and groups like that are doing, which is go to court and challenge each step along the way when it's improper, when the step is improper, and get the courts to rule that it's improper. And you're going to have this showdown between the judicial and the executive branch. And it's going to go up to the Supreme Court. And we have to believe that the judges of the Supreme Court believe in the rule of law. We have to believe that. Because otherwise, why would they be judges? The rule of law has to prevail in society. You can't be a lawyer and not believe in the rule of law. So if they believe in the rule of law, which means, in this case, the Constitution, and everything that flows from constitutional law, it's up to the court to declare the steps that are being taken as unconstitutional and therefore of no effect or should be stopped, or for example, I could imagine a time when ICE could be ordered to stop doing certain things, such as arresting normal, legal immigrants. I could imagine the courts directing that local police forces should not be involved in enforcing immigration rules. It's beyond their mandate to be involved in arresting immigrants unless they've committed criminal offenses.
Mhm.
Things of that nature. So the clarity of thinking that's needed has to come out of the courts, I believe, and out of political leaders who are prepared to stand up for the principles that are in the Constitution.
Yeah, that's the real thing, right? The Constitution has to
Yeah,
supersede here and be the document that's the go-to. This is the go-to document. This is
yeah,
where we land and where we make the decision. And as you pointed out, the judiciary is actually superior to the executive branch.
yeah,
Um, the other thing, interesting thing though, at one point, the Supreme Court said that the president has a wide range of powers that he can exert, even to the point of doing things that he could not be charged for even after leaving office. So
right.
that I think that's what's kind of emboldened President Trump. It's like I can do this because I can get away with it.
Yeah.
Is there a way to pull that back, do you think?
Uh, well, all of this is going to the Supreme Court of the United States with Justice Roberts there and all the others. And they're going to, they have to live with the decisions they're making. And unless they are, threatened, such as their wife and children are going to be killed unless they decide in a certain way, for example, or whatever. In the absence of extortion or criminality, you would expect that the court would be reasonable in what it rules. And what you would expect is that the court would abide by the Constitution. That's why they're there. That's how they got appointed. And if they're appointed by the Constitution and they're functioning because of the Constitution, then they should be striking down laws that are contrary to the Constitution. And so, in a sense, I'm trying to answer what you're asking, which is in terms of reining in President Trump in terms of his conduct. I think the concern was of the court was that presidents need a wide range of discretion in what they're doing and cannot be burdened by concerns that any step that they may take may lead to criminal charges and convictions while they are president. And that whatever steps they take while they are president, provided they are, I think that the thing that really qualifies that ruling is that the president has to believe. I don't think the ruling says the president can believe that it's okay to do criminal things. I think the ruling says that he should be given a broad discretion to conduct his affairs, even to the extent of being immune from criminal prosecution, but on this assumption that what he's doing is not purposefully criminal, like he's not going to go out on the street, start killing people and getting away with it. I don't think the court would ever go for that. Meaning, Trump takes a gun, goes out into the street, starts shooting people on the street. That would not be within the presidential um, the scope of presidential conduct. He has to be conducting his affairs in the context of the duties he has as president of the United States. But that would be all up to the court if down the road, if we get to that stage where the court will have to be, ruling on all these issues.
Yeah, in actuality, he actually did say something to that effect that he could do that and get away with it.
Yeah, he did, but I don't think he can. I'm
No, I
afraid
don't think
not.
no, I don't think so. Not with the way the United States is designed and set up at this point. That might happen in another country, but not certainly
Yeah,
not there.
but there's grave concern about how things are working. not only in the immigrant community, but in general, over this issue of constitutionality of what's going on. It's one thing to get elected, but you have to be elected to do things that are constitutionally right. You can't just get elected to do whatever you want, which is where we're going.
And that's a pretty bad thing in a lot of ways, especially for those who are immigrants.
Yeah,
Uh, now it's understandable that you want to deport people who have illegally crossed your border. That is
yeah,
that's a thing. I mean, there's no doubt that yes, if you've crossed the border illegally, you have jumped the gate.
yeah,
Sure, you should be returned back to your home country.
right,
But in a lot of cases, what we're seeing here is he's not sending these people back to their home country. He's sending them to other countries. That's also another thing too. Uh,
right,
he's not even sending them home.
right,
So if they've jumped the gate. No, if you've come from say the Sudan, you go back to the Sudan, not to El Salvador.
right,
You
right.
know,
There's a
it's
whole, I mean, there's a whole range of issues there. Many of the people who are in the United States as undocumented aliens are from countries not in South America at all, but other parts of the world, from China, from faraway places in Africa, etc. And some of those countries do not agree to return people who are being deported from the United States. To deport someone, you have not only to deport them, but you have to get the consent of the country that you're deporting them to for them to be deported. And normally, what that would require is that the person go back to the country where they were from, their citizenship, which means that the government in power there has to agree to the deportation. In many instances, the governments won't agree. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a buildup of undocumented aliens, immigrants, who are undeportable, not deportable, and therefore are going to be probably put into some sort of camps, internment camps,
mhm.
in the United States awaiting some sort of resolution of their problem. And I don't know how that will be resolved.
Yeah, and that brings up the specter of concentration camps, which is really
Yes,
not what we want to see anywhere in the world. We've already seen that back in World War II with
right.
Auschwitz and the like. So we certainly don't want to repeat that. It's almost like we are seeing a repeat of history, though, in a lot of ways. Um, do you think, though, for Canada, do you think Canada risks getting another incidence of Roxham Road, where we had that problem? Do you think that's a risk that we have to be aware of?
Yes, indeed, Cliff. That's a major issue for Canada, although most Canadians don't really see it as an issue just yet. Just to give you an illustration of why that's an issue for Canada, um, let's assume that the number 11 million people are going to be deported is true. Of the 11 million, we know that, let's say, 1.5 million are criminals and deserve to be deported because of that. Let's say even 2 million. That would leave 9 million left. Of the 9 million that would be deported, surely some of them would think, oh, gee, I've been here over 10 years. I don't want to go back to wherever it is that my country's in war, or, there's famine there, or, like a catastrophe, gangs, violence, etc. And such people might say, well, since I can't stay here because I'm going to be deported or put into a concentration camp, where could I go? And perhaps the answer would be, well, what about up to Canada? Now, if they try just to come up to Canada, unless they have family here, they won't be allowed into the country. At the border, they'll be stopped and sent back into the United States because there's this safe third country agreement, which is still valid for the time being, at least. So they'd be turned back. but maybe they would, maybe some of them would try to come in illegally, that is to say, irregularly. Now you got to guess, it's a wild guess how many would do that. But if there's 9 million people who are looking for options, let's say 10% would be 900,000. And if, let's say only let's say 10% of 10% would still be 90,000. 90,000 new immigrants to Canada that are undocumented and who come in irregularly would be about double what Canada has yearly in the number of refugees that come to Canada. It would be an extraordinary burden on the Canadian healthcare system, on social services, on infrastructure, on housing, and etc. It could be a significant impact on the state of life in Canada were such big numbers to decide that they were going to come to Canada irregularly and have a go of it here. And it's hard to say, the big deal is to predict how many would come. That's hard to say. But the kind of numbers I talked about, I don't think are unreasonable. That's, judging by what's going on, that's a possibility. Even half of, even if it's 45,000, which is like half of 1% of the full population that likely might be looking north, it's still a burden. I mean, it's like the same as the number of immigrants, refugees, roughly the number of refugees. Canada accepts about 50,000 refugees a year. So it'd be another influx of 50,000 more people to Canada. Canada is not in a state where it can afford that kind of a burst of immigrants. So it is a big concern.
This is very fascinating. How did you get involved with immigration law? What got you into this?
Well, several things. One is my family were immigrants. I'm not an immigrant, but my family, my mother, my father, were immigrants to Canada, and my aunt, my mother's sister, and my uncle were immigrants to the United States. They immigrated to Los Angeles. My family, direct family, immigrated to Edmonton. So from an early age, I was attuned to immigrant life and immigrant problems through them. I had a sense of, respect for their efforts and what they were doing, and also sort of a empathy for their hardships. That's one thing. Another thing was, as I went through school and as I went to university, I thought, these international problems that are out there in the world, what's wrong with the world is that the people don't know the law. If only they knew the law. Problems like Ukraine and the war, Russian invasion of Ukraine, or problems like Gaza and what's going on. If I were able to prepare a legal brief and explain to everybody, look, here is the deal. These are the principles. This is the way the law should be read. Everybody would go, oh, of course, that's what was wrong. That's the way I thought the world worked as I was going into university, as I thought, it's all out there. All I have to do is read the law books and then write the legal opinion that would lead to settling all these big disputes. Of course, I was naive and I didn't know about things like self-interest and prejudice and bias and national interest versus a colonial interest, imperialist interest versus colonial interests. There were a lot of factors: human behavior, human greed, lust for power, all kinds of things like that, lust for money. These were things that were beyond my understanding. Not that I understand everything now, because I don't. I wish I did, but I understand better. I understand better than I used to. And so, I thought I'll go to law school and I'll present these briefs and, I'll be able to sort out all these problems. And there won't be any immigrants. There won't be any need for immigration. Well, that didn't happen. And then basically what happened was as I got older, I spent half my life in the United States, half my life in Canada, going back and forth between my mother and her sister, my Aunt Helen, who lived in Los Angeles. So, for example, I went to high school in Los Angeles. And being an immigration lawyer kind of fit in well with what my life was all about in terms of traveling back and forth and the need to be available in both countries, to help my parents and my aunt and uncle and things like that. So those are a few of the reasons why I ended up being an immigration lawyer.
Yeah, and it sounds fascinating. And I guess you do practice in both countries. So
I
that's,
do. Yeah.
yeah. So I bet you see,
I worked 10 years in Los Angeles, 5 years in New York. But my wife, about a dozen years ago or so, said, "Listen, your family is now all passed on. I
Mhm.
still have family. My sisters are in Toronto. We're moving to Toronto because I want to be with my sisters." And here I am in Toronto.
Practicing law.
Yeah,
And you've also written some books. I've seen that you've been involved with the United Nations as well.
yeah, yeah,
You've done some really interesting work all across
yeah.
the board, which I will actually note in the show notes of what
Oh,
you've done
great.
here.
Yeah, sure.
Um, what are you telling people to do with respect to this? I'm like I said, you're probably getting phone calls. What are you
Yeah,
telling people with regard to the questions that are out there regarding, particularly Trump and the immigration question
yeah.
coming up into Canada? What are you saying to them?
Well, first of all, if people are calling because they're afraid and they don't know what to do because they might be deported, they have to contact their local, immigration lawyers or immigrant aid groups who give good advice, such as that you don't have to, if someone comes to your door, starts knocking on your door, doesn't mean you have to open the door. You don't have to allow people in. You don't have to give them your name or occupation or anything like that. You have the right to remain silent, not say anything. Uh, if they are trying to get into your property, there's they have to have a warrant. A warrant involves going before a judge, convincing a judge of the need to invade someone's private home, and the judge has to sign the warrant, and the name on the warrant has to be properly set out. The address has got to be proper, and so on. So if someone shows up at your door and says, "We want to get in," open the door, you say, "Well, do you have a warrant?" And if they say they have a warrant, you say, "Well, let me see the warrant." And you have to check, is your name on the warrant? Is the address on the warrant? Is there a proper signature by a judge of the warrant? In that event, you would have to let them in, but otherwise you can just say, "Well, sorry, I'm not allowing you in." But you have to have, I think it's a good idea to get in touch with a local immigration lawyer, attorney, to have a name and number to call if you are uh, suspecting you might get a visit from ICE, the people who enforce immigration law. That's at the local level regarding things like, how to respond to police and others. If you're on the street and someone stops you and says, I'm a police officer, I want to ask you a few questions. You have the, you need to identify yourself, but you don't have to answer any questions. You can say, "I refuse to answer any questions. I want to talk to a lawyer." And you should keep quiet. You should not be talking to a police officer about things such as immigration. That being said, as far as inquiries going about, what do I do? Can I come to Canada, for example, from the US? By and large, the answer is no. If you're illegally in the US, you're going to be illegally in Canada. Canada will not accept people who do not have legal status in the United States to come to Canada, with few exceptions. Exceptions might be if you marry someone, if you're married to a Canadian, or if you have a family member in Canada and you want to claim refugee status in Canada, might be another exception. But otherwise, there are no direct paths to coming to Canada, with some very, very limited exceptions related to if you're working legally in the United States, such as, for example, you came to the US on what's called humanitarian parole, and you were allowed to enter the US, and you have a work permit, and you're working for a multinational organization, and you're a manager, you could be transferred from the US to Canada to a subsidiary of the multinational. That would work. You could get a work permit to come to Canada that way. Similarly, if you had a bit of money and you were able to establish that you have some creative, novel idea that would be of great benefit to Canada, it's possible you could convince the officials at the Canadian consulate that you should be given permission to come to Canada because of the culturally significant or socially or economically significant impact you might make on Canada. An example might be, for example, if you got a cure to COVID, well, that's something that Canada would be interested in, and you could get your way into Canada with such a innovation. So those are some. So there's no blanket definite no, but it's very limited, and the limit starts with you have to be working legally in the United States.
Yeah, which is a very pretty important aspect of all of this. Andy, where people can get in touch with you is the best place they should go to. What's the path to getting in touch with you for any further questions regarding this subject?
I work at Pace Law Firm, PACE Law Firm in Toronto. So if they call and ask for Andy at Pace Law Firm, you can get a hold of me that way. I also have a website. It's called myworkvisa.com. On there, I have a listing of books that I've written and stuff. If they want to read about stuff I've written, it's called My Books on myworkvisa.com. I've written a number of books, 4 of them, and they can find all that out. All my books are on Amazon, by the way, as well.
Yeah, which I will definitely, again, make sure are noted in the show notes. I want to say thank you very much for taking time out to talk about this very important subject matter. It's not the end of the world, folks, but it is definitely a time for reflection and thinking about what you need to do if you're in the United States and you're seeing this video. Certainly, you need to do that and get in touch with your local immigration lawyer. If you're here in Canada and you have loved ones in the United States, maybe it's time to talk to somebody like Andy about bringing them over into Canada. It's an important topic, and I will definitely make sure, Andy, to get this on our channel as soon as possible so people can take a look. I really appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks for talking, Cliff.
Yeah, not a problem. So that's going to do it for this episode of Candid Conversations Zoomed In. My name again is Cliff. I thank you very much for taking the time to view the video, and please subscribe, join the channel, and become a part of the community. And we'll see you in the next episode.